Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Shake Sales. I'm your host, Maggie Blume, the sales evangelist at Mailshake. And today I'm super excited. We have Rosalyn Santa Elena joining us. She is the founder at the RevOps Collective and the host of the Revenue Engine podcast. But Rosalyn, thanks so much for being here today. Do you mind taking a few seconds to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So thank you for having me. I'm super happy to be here, excited to chat about my favorite topic, revenue operations. As you mentioned, I'm currently the founder at the RevOps Collective, as well as the host of a podcast called the Revenue Engine, which is really focused on founders, CEOs, and other C-level executive leaders, and really focused on their learnings, insights, and advice, right, for building a really robust and scalable revenue engine. So prior to kind of going out on my own, just a couple of months ago, I've been in, various go-to-market and revenue operations, leadership roles for the past 20 plus years now, spending time as, a team of one, building out a function at a really early startup versus a leader with, a team of 20 plus people. So kind of been in that space for quite some time. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And awesome that you've had all that experience too. Like you said, building things from the ground up and now, building your own, your own thing now and having your own podcast, like all super exciting things. And yeah, revenue operations. That's the topic we'll be talking about today. And I know it's been around for a while. Like you said, you've been in the space for a while now, but I feel like revenue operations, maybe the roles or people talking about it feels like it's been on the rise just in the past few years. So what do you think is causing that?
Yeah. I think, I think many people think, revenue operations is something new. And, I would definitely argue that probably the term itself is newer to folks. Because definitely we've been calling it kind of go-to-market ops or sales ops or field operations. But, I think operations has really existed, for as long as sales and marketing or really anything revenue has existed. Someone's been kind of supporting marketing efforts and supporting sales efforts and helping customers, from a, people, process, systems, technology, data, right? And insights and training, right? For the revenue team. And then for customers, I think about even in the hardware world, sort of pre-SaaS, right? We still had to sell boxes to customers and then we had to support that hardware and ship more of it. But I think in the past, operations was more of a back end, kind of a back office function, supporting strategy, supporting day-to-day operations, whether that's like, some of the more administrative things like getting a quote out, booking an order, updating the forecast, things that are a little bit more tactical. But there's definitely been this rise of just, I think, awareness that we need a more strategic and up-leveled operations function. I think we're seeing that rise primarily due to a couple things. One, I think, more complex selling motions, right? And routes to market, right? We're seeing not just SaaS, but like PLG and cloud-based marketplace selling and channel, more channel and partner complexities. And then now we have self-serve and we have all this like no touch. And, when you think about even the SaaS, kind of recurring business model, that's complex, right? Because now it's not just about net new logo acquisition, but I always say revenue is a team sport, right? Because now there's more people involved, there's more teams involved, really in that end-to-end funnel. So I think because now there's just more focus right on customer retention and customer expansion, which means we're spending more time on driving customer value, having a true partnership with our customers, and then, really proving out our value and our ROI by helping customers be successful. So with all those kind of more players involved, that means more complexity around your processes, around handoffs, rules of engagement, roles and responsibilities across the team. So I think it just makes the whole process to acquire revenue and to keep revenue is much more complicated. And of course, you layer on that the fact that we have data everywhere and the tech stack, technology has exploded. I think I read somewhere that the average, salesperson uses like 22 tools, and apps each day.
I don't doubt it. Yeah.
So it's just crazy. So I think that has all, fed into sort of this rise of revenue operations because we need folks to administer and manage all of that data, all of those technologies, and then just keep all of the team aligned across the sort of buyer journey and customer journey, if you will.
Yeah. And I think one really important thing that you hit on that I hadn't even thought about before this conversation is like just the way that our selling has changed. And, even when I first started working in sales, which was maybe like 5 years ago, I didn't hear a lot of leaders. I know it was something important, but I didn't hear a ton of leaders talk about like churn and how do we solve for churn. And that's something that I feel like, even though it was something that we all thought about, it's something that I feel like a lot of teams are becoming very strategic at. And that's, not acquiring new business. That's literally, something that's going to be ongoing forever with your customers. And so the way that you put it of revenue operations is being that glue, because that's a super important part of it. But of course, obviously acquiring new businesses too. And so it's like, how are you going to work that all together? And of course, you need revenue operations to, make that teamwork there, or, just make everything flow smoothly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that also really contributed to sort of this rise of RevOps is you think about the market conditions, right? The last couple of years, the market has been crazy, right? It's like we had the global pandemic, and then we had this kind of high growth, and a lot of money flowing around the next year. And then all of a sudden we're back to, kind of a downturn. And so just the volatility, and just the change being constant. So I think a lot of organizations realize that if they had that strong operational infrastructure to begin with, then those were the companies that were able to really pivot very quickly, kind of dive deep into like what's working, what's not, how should I pivot, what should I do? And then we're able to pivot in those kind of uncertain times and be able to execute faster. Having that strong infrastructure. And those that didn't have operations were struggling, right? They're trying to get their data. What does this, change in the market mean to my business? And then be able to actually execute upon that with the team.
Yeah. Whereas someone who's already focusing on revenue operations kind of had like those cards with them already. So it was easy to make that pivot during these times. Yeah. Really good way to put it. And just learning about it, understanding how important it is too. And for teams out there, maybe considering hiring a revenue operations person, because like you said, with the volatility of the market in the past couple of years, it's obviously something important. But for them considering to hire a revenue operations person, what advice would you give them, or how do you know it's the right time?
Yeah, that's probably like the $1 million question. I think I get asked that quite a bit. It's like, one, now that people have kind of moved past the do I need it question and say, yes, I need it, but when, right? And then when I am ready to hire, what do I hire for? And I think, my advice is sort of, there's no one size fits all for sure. There's no like, everyone should go hire this first. But I think depending on kind of the framework or the guidance that I give folks when they're thinking about building out RevOps or hiring someone for revenue operations is to really think about, what is your go-to-market strategy, but the goals, right? What are the goals that you are trying to achieve in the next, 6 months, 12 months, as well as kind of 2 years and 3 years out, and think about where am I trying to go? And then look at where am I today, right? And kind of try to figure out the current state and kind of where I want to go and where are the gaps, right? So where are the biggest pain points or the gaps that are preventing me from getting to achieve my goals, or at least get the ship righted to get towards those goals? And a lot of times that is, I don't have, the right data. I don't have the right insights, or I don't have the right, I don't have scalability because I don't have enablement of my team, or I don't have, a great planning process. So there's different buckets, I think, that will bubble up to say, okay, these are my top 5 priorities for the next year, for example. And these are the 3 things that are working kind of well, and the other 2 that are just on fire and aren't working at all. Right. And that's where you can kind of say, okay, well, then I definitely need some RevOps support in those areas. And then also look at the strength of your bench, right? Like look at the people that you do have on board, because a lot of times you might have only one hire to make. And you want this person to be able to do everything, right? They have to have, it's the purple squirrel, the unicorn, the one that has done everything, and is willing to do it all again. So I think, focusing in on sort of what things you really need today that are the biggest pain points and gaps. And then looking at, what do you actually have on the team? Like, where are you strong already, right? For example, you might have somebody in a systems role that's really strong. So maybe you don't need to hire somebody to cover systems at this point. Or maybe you have like a finance person who's really good at planning and some of the budget work and, some of the quoting and targeting, or not quoting, but setting quotas and setting targets, then maybe you don't need to focus there, right? So there's kind of the assessment of where's my current state? Where do I need to go? Where are the biggest gaps? And then what do I need to hire for to fill those gaps?
Got it.
And
so just
sort of the when do you know is the right time? It's like, it's early. It's always the right time, right? I was talking about invest early as you can. As soon as you have product market fit, your founder is no longer your only seller. It's probably time to get some kind of RevOps support.
For sure. And I think, there's probably people, and you probably see the scenario too, that just kind of take on the role or take on some of those duties on a specific team. Let's say it's someone on the marketing team or one person on the sales team that just kind of, because I don't know, we've all kind of seen startups before, and I've been in a startup where you just take a role that's kind of there and you do that duty, which is the fun of it. But there's probably some downsides to that if you just kind of have one part of the team, focusing on that, or they just take that up, because obviously revenue operations encompasses everything in RevOps, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So 100%. I see that quite a bit, where maybe you have an SDR who's kind of process, driven. So they try to cover some of the process top of funnel, or your demand gen, leader kind of does some of the marketing automation work. Or even I've seen a lot of like SEs, who do some of the enablement, right? Because they're kind of technical and they're probably a little more process focused as well. I think there's some positives to that in the sense that, you're leveraging the resources that you have and, based on, kind of budget constraints and such, maybe you can't hire somebody full time. The other benefit is, it could be a growth opportunity or a learning opportunity for that individual. But I think the downside, to your question is that you probably have someone who can probably do the job pretty well. They're smart, they're talented, they know how to go do things, but maybe not optimized, right? Okay. If you have somebody who that is their role and that is their expertise and background, they can probably come in and do the job maybe more efficiently, maybe get you up and running faster. But then also there's less trial and error, right? Because they've kind of done it before, seen it before, and that's their strength. And then also that enables your, SDR or SE or whomever to go focus on the things that they're really good at. I think this is the mistake we see a lot, or I see a lot, where, you have your CRO come in, and that person a lot of times is, if they're so focused on trying to get data or getting, some of the things, the insights that they need to be able to run their business, it takes away from their, ability to go out and meet with customers and coach the team, motivate the team, right? And do all the things that they're really, really good at, versus some of the things that they're probably maybe not as good at or they don't like.
Totally. And I think it's always that dance of when you are working at a startup, it's like, okay, when is it really time to hire a person for this position full time that's an expert in it or has done it before? As opposed to try having someone internally, start this engine here too. So I think there's never a perfect time to like gauge that, but you probably get a pretty good gauge of like, okay, let's have people focus on what they're actually good at and let's bring a professional in to help us here.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that, that I've been focused in on, and I think there's a lot of other great firms that are doing this, is sort of this fractional help. Right? Because to your point, sometimes you maybe not ready to hire a full-time person, but you have a problem in one area of your funnel, right? And so you say, okay, well, I just hire somebody, kind of a consultant, to come in and just help me get this set up. And then eventually I'm going to hire a full-time resource to manage it, but help me just build it the right way. And then maybe people, internally can kind of help continue, the momentum and continue having that process work until you're ready to hire a full-time resource.
Yeah, I love that. And that's so perfect for startups out there. And we've done that with like coaching internally or other things as well. And it's, because you're getting a taste of it. You're figuring out that whole structure of what you actually need. And there's a big need for it right now. And then of course, later on, that's when you're actually going to put someone in front of their, doing those day-to-day motions and helping the team thrive from there too. Cool.
Yeah. Because I think the other benefit of that is you bring somebody in who's kind of seen it and done it before, so they have that experience, and they could probably do it in a way that will help you scale. because many times I've joined organizations where, everything's on fire. So they know they need help. They bring in somebody, and then you spend a lot of the time just doing some of the cleanup work. And not just cleanup, but rebuild, because things were built, in a way that was, made sense at the time. And it helped the business at that time, but maybe doesn't help you scale. So then there's a lot of wasted effort in terms of kind of tearing things down and rebuilding versus just building on top of and enhancing.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. It actually reminds me, before, I'm an accountant turned sales rep, which is always a weird path to kind of bring up. But I worked at like a fractional help accounting firm for nonprofits. And it was so funny the way that you mentioned it's like we would go to some nonprofits and everything was like on fire as far as like financial things. And and it was our job to kind of come in there, build on top of it. And then eventually they would hire someone in there to kind of run it from there. But we were more at the top level of things. And it's a super helpful way to do it. And they may not have the resources to hire on someone full on to do that. But just have that strategy in there, because we had done it so many times. So it was like we had all this kind of like all these cards of people that have done this before and certain things that they're good at too. So I love that option. Yeah. But sweet. And so I know I talked with you about this before, but one of my favorite things to do before people get on the podcast is kind of take a look at what they've talked about before and what they really like talking about. And one thing that really stuck with me that I've heard you say on LinkedIn and maybe some webinars is that revenue operations is viewed as a tactical function, but it really should be viewed as a strategic function. So can you just elaborate a little bit more on this?
Yeah, happy to. So when I think about operations, I think there is a lot of tactical work, right? Sure, there's lots of things that we do to just run the day to day, right? And get things set up. But I think the real value of revenue operations is really that strategic aspect, right? Being that strategic differentiator to help organizations, guide them in terms of where they need to go. Maybe 5-6 years ago, I worked for someone who told me that, my job was to know the customer better than anyone else. Right. And I was an operational leader. I had a pretty large team there, but my role was really to guide the business. Somebody, had recently, somebody from Canada who's a big hockey fan, was telling me that, the way that he thinks about RevOps is RevOps tells you like how to skate to the puck, like skate where the puck is going. I think that's the same. I probably butchered it, but where the puck is going versus just skating to the puck. Right. So RevOps is kind of guiding you in terms of being that business partner, being a thought leader, and then helping you see around the blind spots and really what's to come, what's coming versus what's kind of already in front of you. Because I think everyone can see sort of what's already in front of you, but it's the competitive advantage and that strategic differentiator is to be able to really dive into the insights and understand where are we headed, and then come with recommendations on what we need to go do based upon that information. Because I think just the ability to have the right insights, really deeply understand your business, what's working, what's not. It's so incredibly important and really critical, especially with this type of market, to running your business. And I think the only way to do that effectively and efficiently is really to have a function like revenue operations, right? Somebody who is overseeing the end-to-end revenue process, top of funnel, all the way through to the, for a prospect becoming a customer, and then, beyond sort of that end-to-end customer journey, and take that really strategic kind of, holistic approach. I think you mentioned it earlier, but kind of stepping back and looking at it end-to-end and tying everything together. So I look at RevOps as really being that strategic partner to aligning and optimizing, the end-to-end funnel. And it's people, process, technology, but it's also data insights and then enablement also.
Yeah. And just like going back to it too, it's so important, especially in a market like today, like with the amount of competitors of just anyone in the SaaS world, like you're bound to have a decent amount of competitors, even in the space that Mailshake is in. I mean, I don't know. I think it's like I think it's definitely past 50, but just knowing, knowing that the market is, pretty uncontrollable, And also, yeah, being able to see all those different parts of, the revenue engine as a whole, because I think a lot of the times, I mean, me just being a salesperson on our team, my main focus is, and my sales leader's main focus is the sales side of things, is new business, and even certain parts of it, outbound and inbound. And we're so in our worlds of that, where I think revenue operations is so important because, yeah, we can see what's in front of us. And I like that analogy that someone gave. It's like revenue operations can be almost that like predictor of, hey, this is what's to come, or this is how we're going to make it here. Instead of just kind of like going through our day to day and seeing what it's worked for us in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that aligns with sort of that tactical versus strategic, right? Because the tactical can kind of tell you, like report the news, like what actually happened, right? We can run reports and, share some dashboards and things like that. But when they move from tactical and start to be more strategic, that's when you start to get those real insights of where we're going versus where we've been.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's awesome. And it's so great learning about revenue operations from someone that, I mean, from someone that's such an expert, but also for me that I'm really, just like I said, it feels like it's something new that I've been hearing more about in the past couple of years. And I'm really learning more about it. And it's just so fascinating because I think we, from the revenue side of things and connecting all these different pieces, it's so important. It's really an important thing to focus on, whether you hire someone fractional, you have someone internally kind of just setting up the ropes for it, or you hire someone full time in revenue operations to make sure that you have that clear picture for the future.
Yeah, love that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today, Rosalyn. Before we finish up, where can people learn more about the RevOps Collective or learn more about you?
Yeah, definitely. LinkedIn is the best place to go. I'm super active on there, but yeah, definitely follow me and reach out. Yeah, I do have a RevOps Collective page on LinkedIn as well, where you can actually book some time if you want to learn more about RevOps. I'm always happy again to get on my soapbox and talk about how we can unleash the power of revenue operations. So definitely reach out anytime. Always happy to chat.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, yeah, definitely follow Rosalyn on LinkedIn, and she has some great webinars out there, and of course, listen to her podcast as well. But Rosalyn, thank you so much for being on Shake Sales, and thanks so much for everyone listening out there today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right. Awesome.